Hello and welcome to this virtual tour of the Zimmerli Art Museum at Rutgers University. My name is Amanda Potter, and I'm the Zimmerli's Curator of Education and Interpretation. While we truly wish we could welcome you to the museum in person, I hope you'll enjoy this look at a few highlights from our collection, and that it will entice you to visit us on the College Avenue campus when we are able to reopen. Founded in 1966, the Zimmerli Art Museum is one of the largest university art museums in the country, with over 60,000 works in our collection. Our primary collection areas are American art from the 18th century to the present day, European art with a particular strength in works from 19th century France, and the world's largest collection of nonconformist art from the Soviet Union, that is to say, art made by those who defied Soviet dictates about what art could and couldn't be. We also have galleries dedicated to Russian art from before the revolution, a unique and charming collection of original illustrations from children's picture books, and a study gallery where faculty can select works to enhance their teaching. Besides our permanent collection, we also feature special exhibitions offering an in-depth look at a particular artist or subject through art. Recent special exhibitions have included a retrospective of the acclaimed comic artist Alison Bechdel, and last fall's Dimensionism, Modern Art in the Age of Einstein. Exhibitions change twice a year, so there's always something new to see. Let's take a look at some works from our collection, starting with something you can see even though our galleries are closed. The Walking Man is a landmark work of public art located outside the museum on the corner of George and Hamilton Streets in New Brunswick. Day and night you will find him mid-stride, eyes closed, and hands tucked into his overcoat. Normally, if you see a life-size statue of a person outside, you expect it to be of someone famous or infamous. The sculptor of Walking Man, George Siegel, wanted to draw our attention to the dignity of the common person. Siegel, seen here in his studio, lived most of his life on a chicken farm just down the road in South Brunswick, and received his Master of Fine Arts degree from Rutgers in 1963. One of the most important sculptors of the 20th century, his use of plaster casting was inspired by his introduction to plaster bandages developed at Johnson & Johnson. He used friends, family, and neighbors as models, capturing them in situations ordinary and not so ordinary, like this sculpture, Red Acrobat, which graces the Zimmerli's lobby, hanging 2 stories in the air. The Zimmerli is lucky to have one of the most in-depth collections of Siegel's work in the world. Now let's head into our gallery of American art. In 1856, John Jesse Barker painted this view of the New Brunswick Railroad Bridge. This is one of my favorite paintings in the gallery, as it allows us to travel back and glimpse a New Brunswick that is pretty unrecognizable to us today. We are looking across the Raritan River from a location somewhere close to the Zimmerli's present-day location. The mill buildings you see on the right were located on the site of what is now Johnson & Johnson's campus. Barker includes lots of engaging details, such as a horse-drawn carriage pulling a well-dressed couple, a more simply dressed family out for a walk on the banks, and beyond them, on the embankment separating the river and canal, workers leading teams of horses. Only the train on the bridge in the distance gives a hint of the rapid changes that would later transform this landscape. This luminous scene was painted in 1902 by Henry Osawa Tanner. Tanner is rightly heralded as one of the most important African-American painters in history, yet he lived most of his life in France, having moved there in 1891 to escape persistent racism in the United States. The son of a minister, Tanner's paintings were often inspired by his Christian faith, but few are as mysterious as his work titled The Good Shepherd. A bright moon lights the night sky, but 2 trees cast shadows on the solitary figure standing on a hill. Is this the shepherd from the parable looking for his lost sheep? Or perhaps a representation of Jesus in the garden after Judas's betrayal? The painting's ambiguity and mystery are a source of its power. In The Toast by Mexican artist Rufino Tamayo, 2 outstretched arms clink their glasses together in this international sign of good cheer. Tamayo was celebrated for his skillful use of color, and here the warmth of the subject matter is reflected in the warm tones of reds, oranges, browns, and yellows. These colors are offset by the cool blue and green of the table. Tamayo painted the toast in 1945 during an extended time living in New York City, where he was exposed to many new ideas in modern art. He was especially influenced during this period by Pablo Picasso, and you can see the influence of Cubism in the wine bottle on the table. If you look up in our American gallery, you'll see another highlight of our collection, Sky Sheet by Jeffrey Hendricks. Hendricks taught at Rutgers for nearly 50 years and was active in Fluxus, a movement that started in the 1960s and pushed the boundaries of what art could be. Simultaneously a painting, a sculpture, and an installation, Sky Sheet is an excellent example of this experimentation. Clouds were a recurring theme in Hendricks's work, painted on large canvases for performance or everyday objects like cars. As you look closer at Sky Sheet, you'll see that the fabric is pinned to a clothesline with clothespins. With my 21st century eyes, I can't help but see it as wishful thinking for how we might undo some of the damage of air pollution and mankind's other harmful impacts. We'll move now to some highlights from our collections of European art. This portrait of an artist in her studio is currently unattributed, meaning we don't know the identity of the artist who painted it. We can assume it is likely a self-portrait, and from certain details like the clothing, we can date it to about 1790 in France, a time when a small but significant number of women achieved success in the highly regulated French system of academies and salons. Portraits often tell a story about who the sitter is and how they see themselves in the world, and this image is full of details that give us insight into the life and aspirations of this unknown woman. I say aspirations because the primary objective of this work seems to be asserting the woman's status and skill as an artist. She pauses from her canvas to look at a boy I assume is her son. The chest of paints and tools beside her is open and disheveled from use. In contrast, she herself is wearing a fine gown, whose satin texture is skillfully captured. I have trouble believing anyone would paint in such a beautiful white dress, but that underscores how this portrait is carefully composed to show the artist in their best light. In contrast, this group of sculpted portraits was intended to do quite the opposite. Taking power in 1830, Louis Philippe heralded himself as a citizen king who would govern France by the juste milieu, or middle way, avoiding the oppressive excesses of past rulers. This, however, quickly gave way to authoritarian rule. These 36 clay busts were commissioned by the owner of a newspaper that routinely satirized Louis Philippe and his government minions, and these busts served as models for political cartoons. The artist Honoré Daumier, who sculpted these busts, was one of the newspaper's cartoonists and one of the most celebrated printmakers of the day. He humorously exaggerates the figure's physical characteristics, capturing their likeness, but in a most unflattering light. Many of the figures, who were primarily the king's deputies and ministers, are shown grimacing or even seemingly asleep, not exactly a picture of who you'd want in charge. In an era before photography and daily newspapers, the cartoons based on these caricatures essentially functioned as mass media, disseminating scathing views of the current state of affairs and those the publishers and artists considered responsible. The Zimmerli has the only complete set of these historic sculptures outside of France. The Zimmerli also has a world-class collection of posters that advertise the offerings of Paris's famed nightlife. In Toulouse-Lautrec's poster on the left, he highlights the nightclub Le Divan Japonais as a place where famous performers themselves go to be entertained. The central figure with red hair is Jane Avril, the star of the Moulin Rouge Cabaret. She is shown watching a performance by singer Yvette Gilbert, who, even though her head is cut off by the frame of the image, would have been recognizable by her trademark long black gloves. On the right is one of our most iconic artworks, a poster for a traveling show featuring entertainers from Le Chat Noir, French for Black Cat, one of the most famous cabarets in Paris. The artist Théophile Steinlen was one of the most in-demand artists and illustrators of the day, and remains beloved today for his numerous images of cats. Our European galleries always feature rotating exhibitions of works on paper from our collection. The most recent selection featured the work of James Tissot, a French artist who captured the fashionable society of Paris and London in paintings and prints. The print on the left shows the influence of Japanese artists whose prints were just becoming known in Europe. And the print on the right, a recent acquisition, shows the spectacle of another one of Paris's entertainments, the extravagantly costumed chariot races and pageants orchestrated in the Paris Hippodrome. The marks on the bottom reveal that this is a proof, or a work made to determine whether the artist's desired effects were being captured during the printing process. A little history lesson as we enter our Dodge wing of Soviet nonconformist art. In the early years of the Soviet Union, avant-garde art was embraced by the communist government as a way to fashion a new society. However, as Stalin consolidated power and moved towards dictatorship, he saw art as something that needed to be carefully controlled to prevent dissent and promote a uniformly positive picture of the Soviet Union. This poster is an example of the resulting official style of socialist realism, showing an idealized view of citizens from various Soviet republics overjoyed to meet their beloved leader Stalin. After Stalin's death, the rules stayed in place and the government continued to tightly control access to art schools and exhibitions, but it was more possible for artists to work underground and make the art that they wanted to. These artworks are collectively known as nonconformist art because the artists didn't conform to the official rules, but there is no uniform nonconformist style. Some artists wanted to make abstract art, which wasn't permitted because there was no fixed meaning. Others wanted to reflect on pre-revolutionary life, or express their criticisms of the Soviet government. I'm continually drawn to this work, Prolonged and Undiminishing Applause by Alexei Sudenkov, painted towards the end of the Soviet Union in 1987. In a cavernous gray hall, thousands of figures clap their hands until they are red, a physical performance of their required loyalty to the Communist Party. Official portraits of the four previous Soviet rulers, Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, and Andropov, watch over the scene. They are the only figures with facial features. The masses are anonymous, their individual experiences and emotions unimportant to the collective rule. And last, given that this is a graduate student event, I had to include this work by Viktor Pivovarov, entitled Sacrolazator for Dissertation Defense. Sacrolazator is a made-up term that Pivovarov gave to his drawings of humorous groupings of everyday objects he devised to help one cope with a variety of social or professional situations, like waiting in line or dinner with your parents. The series underscores the absurdity of Soviet life, where official messages proclaimed the economic success of the nation, but grocery shelves were often bare. So does this combination of a colander, candy, and a sock with a needle through it offer protection and luck while giving your dissertation a defense? I'm not sure. If any of you try it, please be sure to report back. I hope you've enjoyed this glimpse at some of the highlights from the Zimmerli's collections. We can't wait until we can welcome everyone back to the museum in person. Until then, there are lots of ways to stay engaged. I hope you can join us on October 1st for the virtual book launch of Angela Davis Seize the Time, a publication which accompanies our exhibition which will debut in the fall of 2021. We've also put together a suite of art activities to keep the creative spark burning in artists young and old. Head to our website, Zimmerli at Home, to find art activities, videos, playlists, and more. You can also browse more of our collections on our new collection website. Head to zimmerli.emuseum.com, where you can browse our collection by artist, medium, country, and more. I also invite you to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram at Zimmerli Art Museum, Facebook, and Twitter at Zimmerli Museum, and stay tuned for a brand new Zimmerli website coming in 2021. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great semester.